Good morning, and welcome to the Hokyoji Sunday morning Dharma talk. And I'm happy to introduce Ryushin Jan Freier today as our speaker. Hello, hello, Ryushin. Good to see you again. Um, and Ryushin is a longtime practitioner who started practicing at MZMC in 1985. He received jukai there from Dainin Katagiri Roshi in 1988 and worked in tenzo and other kitchen-related jobs until 1994. He practiced at the Clouds-in-Water Zen Center for a couple of years and became a member of Hokyoji practice community in 2016. He volunteers regularly at Open Arms and Second Harvest Heartland to feed those in need. And so, Rushin, we look forward to hearing what you have to say today. So, thank you so much for joining us and offering to share your understanding of Dharma with us today. Thank you, Rushin.
Am I loud enough as I am?
Pardon me?
Okay. Am I loud enough?
Oh, I think so.
Okay.
It's good for me.
So these sittings before giving a talk are always really interesting. So I was at winter practice period, and I was reminded this past week of a story that Katagiri Roshi. I'm getting feedback.
A little bit. Tokai, you might need to mute.
Oh, okay.
So Katagiri Roshi told the story of monks who'd go off into forest practice in Southeast Asia, and they'd be there for 3 months, and they'd think that they'd sorted everything out and everything was peaceful and calm, and then they'd come back and renew their normal life and find out that they hadn't really accomplished too much in the way of peace and harmony. So this has been kind of the past week for me, is like I'm kind of angry that all that peace and harmony that I had established kind of went away. So that's one prelude to the talk. Another prelude to the talk is I'm going to talk about Zazen. I'm going to talk about meditation, because why not? I mean, Katagiri Roshi always comes back to Zazen, and it's probably a little difficult, so I'm a little more nervous about this talk than usual, but I'm going to take a different kind of take on it, and I hope I'm up to the task. I know we're probably going to learn something today, but I'm hoping it'll be useful. So the theme I want to set is also a difficult theme, is a quote from Nagarjuna. All phenomena are empty of self-nature and are dependently co-arisen with all else. All phenomena are empty of self-nature and are dependently co-arisen with all else. So there's no phenomena that isn't thoroughly interdependent with everything else. And then the next one is a little more difficult, of course, because you're starting to try to talk about emptiness. Emptiness itself is empty of its own existence and does not refer to a transcendental reality beyond or above phenomenal reality. So the real idea there is it's not that far away. It's right here. And it's kind of this self-nature of things to be codependent arising. What's left after you take away everything that's codependent? So another thing I want to say is I've been studying a lot of different texts, whatever, books on meditation. And I have to say that no matter how much I study, what actually happens when I'm sitting down hasn't changed much. Does this come as a shock to anyone? No, Buddhism is all about relationship. And so what happens is pretty much the same no matter what, but the relationship to those things that happen can change. So now I want to go off on what looks like a diversion, but I'm going to try to pull it back. So a long time ago, when I first entered corporate life, we were trying to solve a problem. And my boss was a very innovative boss. He would take off after lunch on these 2-3 hour bike rides, which was kind of strange at the time. And then he would come back, he would be all enthused and very inspirational to us. And we were trying to solve some difficult problems, matching curves to data. And he came up with the thing that, what does nature do when it's trying to solve a problem? Nature puts out a lot of trial and error, a lot of samples to try to find something that works. And so he had the example of an oak tree puts out a lot of acorns. So I've been looking at oak trees putting out acorns, and it turns out there's a lot more to this than one might think. That oak trees have what are called mast years, where they put out a lot of acorns, much more than usual. And scientists are kind of puzzled. They haven't figured out when, they haven't been able to predict when there's going to be this so-called mast year, which is kind of interesting that there's this mystery that people have noticed for years and years. They do know that if there isn't a good, healthy moisture supply in the spring, it's not likely to be a mast year. And it's actually easier to predict when it's not going to be a mast year, because after a mast year, there aren't mast years. So the reason oak trees do this is interesting. And that also, I should say that the scientists or forestry scientists are wondering if the trees communicate somehow to each other about when to do this, because all the oak trees of a certain species, of a certain type, tend to do it at the same time. So they're wondering if the trees communicate with each other somehow, or whether it's just strictly biology. They haven't figured that out either. But the reason they do it is called predator saturation. They put out tons and tons of acorns so that the predators, or we might actually call them consumers of acorns, there's more acorns than the consumers can possibly consume. So there's going to be some acorns left over to possibly germinate and create more oak trees. So what happens because of that, and I also should point out that a lot of oak trees in nature are germinated and become oak trees because blue jays and squirrels bury them and forget about where they buried them and don't dig them up. And that's much more likely to happen during a mast year when there's so many acorns that they don't need to dig them all up. So what happens with all of us when we have a lot of resources and things are abundant is that these consumers of acorns think they're living in high clover, and they overpopulate, thinking that this is the way things should be, and they tend to create a lot more consumers. Well, then the oak trees cut way back the next few years, and then there's starvation and the population goes down. And when the population goes down far enough, then the oak trees create another mast year with fewer consumers. So there's this whole dynamic, and it's like, this is my first example of interdependence. interdependence with masters and oak trees and consumers like squirrels and blue jays and deer and the little worms that get into acorns. It's all this kind of dynamic interdependence. So all phenomena are empty of self-nature and are dependently co-arisen with all else. It's funny that think that oak trees have some kind of intelligence, but maybe not. So one point that has been driven home over and over again is that Zazen is pointless. Here's a quote from this, I can't see it. Oh, The Art of Just Sitting. For being, there's been a lot of stuff written on Buddhism and a lot of stuff written on sitting. This has many, many little articles and talks. This one is from Norman Fisher. Zazen is fundamentally a useless and pointless activity. A person is devoted to Zazen not because it helps anything or is peaceful or interesting or because Buddha tells him to do it, though we may imagine that it helps or is peaceful or interesting, but simply because one is devoted to it. You can't argue for it or justify it or make it into something good. You just do it because you do it. It's not even a question of wanting to or not wanting to. Zazen is for Zazen's sake. Birds sing, fish swim, and people who are devoted to Zazen do Zazen with devotion all the time, although there is no need for it. This is kind of maybe a radical, difficult idea, but it's like I'm finding more and more that it's true. So, and accepting the idea that Zazen is pointless and it's just present moment awareness without anything to achieve, you actually end up achieving more by giving up that binding to wanting something. So, Dogen talks about not thinking, non-thinking. I could quote you this from the Kim book on Eihei Dogen, mystical realist, his several pages on non-thinking, but it's only more confusing. You go to a book for clarity and you find less and less clarity. I like this little dialogue that Norman Fisher includes. My favorite Zen dialogue about Zazen, which I quote whenever I have an excuse to, is the saying of Master Chao Zhou. When a student asked him, "What is Zazen?" he replied, "It is non-Zazen." The student said, "How can Zazen be non-Zazen?" Chao Zhou replied, "It's alive. It's alive." So it's beyond our ideas. But Zazen is something that evolved out of meditation. So the Buddha, if we recall, had two meditation teachers when he started out on his quest for enlightenment. He had two meditation teachers and they both kind of didn't deliver what he wanted. And he was so good at the one meditation that the teacher wanted him to stay on and become his co-teacher and take over the practice. But the Buddha thought, well, this isn't getting me where I want to go. This isn't liberation. So he went on. So the Buddha came up with his own. So let me say that some people describe these different schools of meditation, which Zazen is one school, as a blend of shamatha and vipassana. So shamatha is calming and vipassana is noticing. So the Buddha, we studied the Maha Satipatthana Sutta in winter practice period, and this follows this blend just beautifully. So the Buddha starts out with pretty I don't know. A lot of people are familiar with this. We should be observing the body in and as the body, observing feelings in and as feelings, observing mind in and as mind, and observing phenomenon as phenomena. So he starts out with what I consider shamatha, or calming, was by following the breath or paying attention to the breath. And we had, Jushin had a better translation than the Glenn Wallace translation of breathing in long. No, directly, I'm breathing in long. It's actually better to think of it as breathing in heavy. I know I am breathing in heavy. So if you've just come upstairs from doing the laundry and you sit down to do zazen, you're going to be breathing heavy. After you've been sitting for a while, you're not going to be breathing short. You're going to be breathing light. And so I think it's a rhythmic breathing, and it's a calming breathing. So you're aware of your breath. You're aware of noticing your breath. The most, and then it goes into different, practicing, paying attention, paying bare knowing, paying attention in various ways. And so one of the more interesting ones to me was on mind. It's a kind of state of mind. It's the 16th practice, so we've jumped ahead quite a bit. But I really like this one. Now you should live observing mind in and as mind. Know a mind possessed of infatuation directly as a mind possessed of infatuation. Know a mind free from infatuation directly as a mind free from infatuation. Know a mind possessed of anger directly as a mind possessed of anger. Know a mind free from anger directly as a mind free from anger. And it goes on and on to delusion, free from delusion. Know an attentive mind directly as an attentive mind. Know an inattentive mind directly as an inattentive mind. Know an expansive mind directly as an expansive mind. Know a contracted mind directly as a contracted mind. Know an undignified mind directly as an undignified mind. I don't really know what an undignified mind is, but it's there. Know a dignified mind directly as a dignified mind. Know a concentrated mind directly as a concentrated mind. Know a scattered mind directly as a scattered mind. Know a relaxed mind directly as a relaxed mind. Know a tense mind directly as a tense mind. So there's a few interesting points, I think, to this, is that there's no such thing as bad zazen. There's no such thing as bad meditation. There's just noticing these states of mind. You can have what you consider a bad state of mind. As long as you're noticing it, you're practicing. There's no such thing as bad meditation as long as you're noticing. The other thing that's, I think, really interesting is the Buddha. Well, there's two things. One is he's not telling you you should be happy. Just notice how you are. Notice what's going on right in front of you, inside of you, your mind, your state of mind, in your mind. And he's also not interested in the story and the narrative that you tell yourself how you got to this state of mind. And I think there's a few reasons for that. One is it's distracting. You get off in the story and it just goes on and on and on. A narrative, blah, blah, blah. It's this old phrase, who knows how deep the mud is? Who knows how deep the mud is? Once you get going on a narrative about why you're in a deluded mind, where's the end of it? And the other thing is, you're not can poke holes in these narratives. You're already conditioned to think in a certain way, and that may not be right. You can be off. But one thing is undeniable is how your state of mind is much more real. Your state of mind is much more undeniable than the story behind why you have a state of mind. And of course, as Norman Fisher points out in the same talk, we're going against the grain here. We like the explanations. We like the narratives. We like thinking that we're knowing what's going on. We like the explanation of why we're at any place. So I have a Samsung TV, and Samsung TV has, 170 channels for free. And one of the channels shows Rockford every night. Rockford has 2 seasons of Rockford. So you may think this is a diversion, but I'm going to get there. So David Chase, who wrote and produced The Sopranos, earlier in his career wrote for the Rockford Files. So he really honed his craft doing the Rockford Files. And so we love kind of these detective stories, right? Because we solve the problem. We put out the acorns, we put out things, and we solve problems. We have the explanation, and everything's resolved. So Rockford's basic strategy a lot of times is he pokes the bear. He goes out and he finds some basic clue, and he interjects himself into the situation. Well, then the bad guys overreact, and then he knows more and more as he overreacts. This is the basic strategy in almost every show. So one show, he's solving one episode, he's solving this crime that happened like 30 years ago. And of course, in these hour shows, the last 5 minutes is the resolution, right? So he comes up with the resolution. All the pieces fit. This is something that you really, from dealing in software, I can tell you when all the pieces start to come together and you see the solution, it's really a nice feeling that all the pieces are coming together and fitting together, and everything makes sense. That's what we like. Everything makes sense. So Rockford has this explanation, has this theory, and he starts to expound this theory, and everything is fitting together. Everything is just perfectly making sense. And then somehow out in his trailer, there's a gunshot, and the person who was supposed to be dead 30 years ago is dying in his front step. And the person who's dying in his front step starts to explain the story that actually happened. And it's not the same as Rockford's story. It's completely different, but all the pieces fit in a different way. We go through this kind of thing all the time. People see things, and this guy, he's got no reason to be telling fibs because, well, first of all, he wasn't around for 30 years, and now he's dying. He's got no reason to not tell the truth. So Rockford is kind of disappointed because his theory isn't there. But at the same time, there's a better explanation. So these explanations we have are kind of illusory, I'll say. And we've been conditioned to think in certain ways. So the issue comes up in meditation, what to do with thoughts. This is kind of a prime issue. So this is from another essay from the book of The Art of Sitting, from G.U. Kennett. One must not deliberately try to think, nor deliberately try not to think. One must not deliberately try to think, nor deliberately try not to think. Thoughts come up and go in our heads, and we can either play with them or just sit there and allow them to pass. Too many of us allow ourselves to be hijacked by our thoughts. While some try to deliberately push them away, both of these activities are completely incorrect. He's rather strict here. The Japanese distinguish between deliberate thought and natural thought. There is absolutely nothing wrong with natural thought. Because our ears are not plugged up during meditation, it is normal for us to hear cars passing on the road and birds singing. Because our eyes are not closed, it is only reasonable that we will notice patterns on the carpet, floor, or wall. These things will only disturb us if we permit ourselves to discuss them in our own minds. If one merely notices that a car is going by, there is no problem. However, if one notices that a car is going by and becomes annoyed or pleased about it, then meditation has already ceased. All that is required in meditation is that one sit with a positive attitude of mind, knowing that if one does so, one will indeed find the true Buddha within oneself. So I think between natural and deliberate thought. So thoughts come up. Uchiyama Roshi has a diagram in his book, Opening the Hand of Thought, where we're going along in Zazen and a thought comes up and he says, as we notice the thought, that is Zazen. As we notice. Martine Batchelor talks about the practice of relinquishment. As thought comes up, we practice relinquishing the thought, but we also practice noticing the thought. So the relinquishing and letting go are two of the things that happen when the thought is conditioned. The thought is kind of, well, here's another little story. When I was at winter practice period, this shirt I was wearing had Kyoku gave me a Kleenex, and I put the Kleenex in this pocket. And then at the end of the week, I did the wash. And then for the rest of the week, every time I picked up some clean clothes, there might be a little shred of this Kleenex falling around, right? So I'm thinking, well, that's interesting. So this Kleenex, so I rode home with Alan Williams. Alan Williams grew up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Oshkosh, Wisconsin is the home of Kleenex. Who knew? Community of trees in Wisconsin. Oshkosh is on Lake Winnebago, and the Fox River has a 200-foot drop between Lake Winnebago and Lake Michigan, or as some people are calling it now, Lake Wisconsin or Lake Illinois, whichever one you choose. Anyway, 200-foot drop creates a lot of hydropower. It takes a lot of hydropower to turn a tree into a Kleenex. This is interdependence again. So interdependence. So now I'm seeing shreds of Kleenex every time I bring out new clothes. And I'm thinking, this is similar, this is analogous to my thoughts in Zazen. What are my thoughts in Zazen? They are shreds of my conditioning. They are just like the trees turned into Kleenex. I've turned into all my conditioning into these little thought fragments, these little thought worries, these little thoughts delights, these little thoughts fantasies, these little thoughts, they come up. They're codependent. All phenomena are empty of self-nature and are dependently co-arisen with all else. Everything that comes up in Zazen, all these thoughts are totally co-arisen with all else. There's in the Glenn Wallace book, there's a few little things on conditioning and unconditioning. Basically, conditioned, we can recognize conditioned because there's a beginning, there's a period where it's there, and there's an ending. And those things that are unconditioned, there's no beginning, there's no period where they're existing, there's no ending. And they're side by side. This is what we can discover in meditation. They're side by side. But I really like the idea of Norman Fisher. We just do it because we're devoted to it. From the first time we sat down, something happened. And there's something that's hard to describe, but there's something about it that's attractive. So now we're really going to go off on what appears to be a diversion. And I'm going to talk about organic molecular structures. So one time, well, many times, when I would go home to visit my parents, the things that they would do would be they would go to flea markets, they would go to estate sales, they would go to these shops where I was just bored to death because there was nothing there that was really interesting to me. But one time I saw this organic molecule kit, and my brother, younger brother, was a chemical engineer. And I thought, well, I'll bring this home to him. I bought it for like 25 cents. And it had carbon atoms with 4 places. Carbon atoms have 4 places they can make connections to: hydrogen atoms, oxygen atoms, sodium atoms, whatever. And the little connecting bonds. So I hand this to my brother, and he immediately starts playing with it, and he creates this molecule. It's not to scale, but it's about this long, right? And it's got a long tail, and it's got a knob on it. And he said, this is soap, and the way soap works. He tells me how soap works. So the long tail doesn't like water. The knob on the end likes water. So they call these, now that I've looked it up, they call these hydrophilic that likes water, hydrophobic that doesn't like water. So the way soap works is the hydrophobic grabs onto dirt and grease because it doesn't want to be with water. And the knob part wants to be in water. So the way soap works in solution is they create this, what they call a micelle. They create a round set of molecules, and the knobs create this round part, and the long stringy things are in the middle. And then as you scrub or you just let the soap go around, the long stringy hydrocarbon long chain molecule grabs onto dirt, grabs onto grease, grabs onto whatever to stay away from water. But the round cells are in solution, and they lift the dirt into the solution. So this is my crazy analogy for Zazen, because we love Zazen in some way. And so the hydrophilic knob ends of the soap release us into solution, and we take the dirt and we just lift it off and put it into solution. We take our thoughts and we put them into the solution of Zazen. So there's a couple ways that we do this. There's a couple ways that we have this kind of soap in Zazen. The most important one is to suspend judgment. There's no bad meditation. There's just noticing. The suspending of judgment, being with whatever's there, that has a certain soap action. It's very important. And it's also this idea of non-binding, this kind of letting go, this non-attachment. This little round set of molecules is all about non-attachment. The dirt is not able to attach because it's lifted off. So this is from a different translation of some Fukan Zazengi. Free yourself from all attachments and bring to rest the 10,000 things. Think of neither good nor evil and judgment right or wrong. Stop the operation of mind, will, and consciousness. Bring to an end all desires, all concepts and judgments. If a thought arises, take note of it and then dismiss it. When you forget all attachments steadfastly, you will naturally become Zazen itself. This is the art of Zazen. It feels kind of rough to dismiss thoughts. I mean, they came from a long way. They're attached to absolutely everything. All phenomena are empty of self-nature and are dependently co-arisen with all else. Every one of our thoughts is co-arisen with everything else. Our particulars go back and back and back and back, but there's an original face before we were born. When you're not thinking of anything good and anything bad at that moment, what is your original face? This is kind of a direct path to understanding emptiness. But I also wanted to read, this is Trust in Mind that we did at another one of winter practice periods, at least part of it. This was supposedly written by the third patriarch of Zen, but thanks to reading one of the books, now I know that this is unlikely actually written by the third patriarch of Zen. Nonetheless, it's well-intentioned. And one of the verses is, the more you think and talk, the more you lose the way. Cut off all thinking and pass freely anywhere. So that kind of tells me I should quit talking. Thank you. If you have any comments, I will certainly stumble around trying to answer them.
Well, thank you, Jushin, for informing me that Oshkosh is famous for Kleenex. I think when I was a teenager or something, my dad would travel to Oshkosh to buy overalls, if I remember right. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I remember. But I mean, that was like a 500-mile trip. He would go to buy overalls. I guess he really liked those overalls or something.
Yeah, I have no explanation for why Oshkosh Bagosh is in Oshkosh, but there's a reason that they're there for paper milling. And Alan also told me that Charmin is based in Green Bay. So the Fox River continues to provide hydropower for forest.
Okay, wonderful. Well, then I really did have this. I appreciate your analogy about soap in Zazen. So I would like to ask you to pursue that a little more, and if you could maybe create some kind of a soap that we could use that where we wouldn't actually have to do Zazen, then I would be really happy. That could be my legacy, that that one of my students created some kind of soap that, will just cleanse you off, and you really don't need to do Zazen anymore. So if you can make that happen, that would be great for Hokyoji. So if you could work on that, that'd be nice.
There are many videos on YouTube about creating soap and all the powers of soap, and some of them are very detailed in as far as like for organic chemistry students with ester bonds and triglycerides and all this stuff. But the creation of soap is actually pretty easy. You just take an oil and some lye, and there's something in the lye. It's not all of the lye. It's just one product of the lye. And you take an oil, and the oily part is the knobby part, and then the long chain is some other part. But it's called sapification. Just
okay. Well, thank you. Yes. Okay. And yet, Mary's got a comment.
Thank you, Ryushin, for your talk. I do have a question. And it relates to this idea of relinquishing. So and time. So I feel as I've gotten older, sometimes I might be in a discussion about something and I'm trying to articulate something, and I just cannot think of a key word, something that would tie everything together. It would be like, and I'm just emotionally getting triggered and frustrated, and I'm, just sort of embarrassed, and it's like, oh, the word. I need the word to like progress in this discussion that I'm having with somebody. And the only way I can come up with the word is to actually just relinquish the thoughts. Like, okay, I'm just checking out here, completely checking out of this. And you can do that in some settings, and some other settings, people are like looking the other way, and, like you've been now dismissed. So my question is, so with this relinquishing, and I've had this, it's sort of a kind of a letting go, and mind kind of goes blank, and then it's really a change. And you just kind of sit there in silence. Sometimes the word will come, and sometimes, it doesn't. It comes later in the day, or I don't know. So I'm asking, when you sit zazen, I mean, can you sit zazen and really have this letting go and just noticing in a matter of just seconds? Or does zazen, because when you sit zazen, it's always 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, the monks sit for all day. And so I'm just asking what you think.
it's hard, isn't it? Sometimes, what I said, the zazen before giving the talk is always so interesting, because it's like you're trying to remember everything that you want to say, and at the same time you want to relinquish your thoughts so you can pay attention. So the interesting thing about shikantaza that I didn't go into is it's considered techniqueless, right? It's like Dogen never talks about following the breath or counting the breath. You just sit. He gives an awful lot of instructions on how to do it, but he never creates, there's never an object for the meditation. So whatever happens, but he does say to dismiss thoughts, which is like, dismiss is kind of a harsh word in some ways. It's like, oh, dismiss thoughts because it's wasn't a good thought in the first place. We're going to dismiss that. And some of them are good thoughts. And so Martine Batchelor, sometimes she says it's a decision point, it's a pivot point. If something comes up and it's interesting, maybe you want to explore it. Don't beat yourself up about it one way or the other. And these gaps where you can't think of the right word, I mean, that's just something that happens as you get older. Sometimes you really get in the zone and you're just able to move through and the words all come to you. And other times it's like, oh, there's a word for this. And I can't get it. And then you start to make up something that kind of works around it or something. So I'll tell you what happened with my dad with Alzheimer's, which will be kind of scary to you. But he first would go through this where he couldn't think of the word and he would just go quiet. But you kind of, because of the context, you basically could follow what he was trying to say. And then it reached another stage where he would just throw out the first word that came to mind, which was kind of complete nonsense a lot of the time. And that was further along. And then eventually he just went quiet, which was the worst. So, but he's still, Katagiri Roshi talks about how even when we're not talking, even when we're just being with each other, we put out a certain stink. But it's like he uses this word stink, but I notice other texts use the word perfume. So we can put out a perfume of delusion, or we can put out a perfume of awakening. But people, even when they're very ill, or like my dad was still very much the personality he was, even with advanced Alzheimer, and people who are very ill, it's the same thing. They're still that person. So I don't know. That's probably wandering around, not really answering your question. It's going to happen. There is this kind of, I like to think in Zazen is like, if this is important, I'll think about it when I'm not sitting. Or I've started writing things down much more. I used to just test my memory by saying, I'll remember this. Well, now that's not true anymore. I'm to the age where I say, I can't remember everything. So if it's possible, just to write it down and then put things aside, set things aside during Zazen, because all these instructions from Trust in Mind, they're just like, doesn't apply to everyday life. You can't go through everyday life without thinking, without thoughts. But it's like you have this long chain soap thing. You got the attraction in one thing, you got the attraction in the other. We're both things at the same time. So I don't know if that helps. Jushin, what did you think?
We read the same books, so we're always recommending the same books to each other. I saw one recently that I thought was really interesting that it's notice every time your mind leaves your body. And I think this goes with Uchiyama Roshi, that noticing. But if you really notice the fabrication going on of the thoughts about thoughts, you do realize you've left your body. You've left the zazen, you've left the just sitting. And you just come back.
But this is kind of for me, this is kind of the story of the acorns too, is that the mind just puts out all these acorns. It's like you can't stop it, but you can deal with it.
I think it's also hard because, sitting there, especially sitting there at a wall, wall gazing, that it automatically brings up stuff from the subconscious. Like the conscious gets bored and the subconscious starts playing and all kinds of weird stuff starts happening, starts coming up. And that's fine. I mean, what is it in one of the if anyone hasn't read it, it's The Art of Just Sitting. Is that what it is, Ryushin? Yeah. It's a great book. And so I think it might be Uchiyama Roshi because I don't know why there's an emoji there. It's there we go. He talks about, yeah, your brain just secretes thoughts. That's what brains do. It just we're not trying to stop that part. Or notice that part.
Now, there's a great introduction by Taigen Dan Layton about the development of shikantaza as a techniqueless practice. It's not the practice of just sitting, it's the art of just sitting. So I think that's Daido Lori's contribution. You want to put the art in there. So, but the real emphasis of Dogen is that we're practice realization, of practice awakening, of practicing awakening. And so I think for me, this practicing the idea that all phenomenon are co-arisen is like seeing the thoughts as part of this huge chain of phenomena that are all connected. That's really helped because everybody goes through the same thing, and there's got to be the other side of that. There's got to be all this fabrication, all this conditioning. There's also the unconditioned side of that.
We have a few more minutes if there's another comment or question.
Yeah, Ryushin, I just had a question about the book you were uh, uh, reading from, kind of knowing the states of mind, where you examine or notice whether you have expansive mind, contracted mind, concentrated, or just distracted mind. That sort of um, the opposites of that you were describing. I was wondering uh, what book you were reading that from, or noticing it.
That's Glenn Wallace.
Oh, okay.
What's the name of that book?
Basic Teachings
Basic Buddhism.
Yeah, Basic Teachings of Buddha.
Okay, thank you.
But it's the Satipatthana Sutta, Frank.
Which is that? Okay.
Satipatthana, it's the four establishments of mindfulness.
Oh, okay.
So that's a translation that Glenn Wallace was doing of that, but there's many translations by Thich Nhat Hanh and
Yeah.
Bhikkhu Bodhi. It's a very, very fundamental sutta that many people have translated, and it's a very moving section.
Yeah. I was
Looking at
I
your
was ta-
mind, everything that can
yeah.
happen with your mind. He just says,
Mhm.
just notice. One of my favorite lines from that is, if you have exalted mind, just realize that exalted mind is happening right now, or unsurpassed mind. So I kind of like that statement. Okay, this is just unsurpassed mind. I've never surpassed this point before, but anyway, this is what it is, and that's all it is. So it's just nothing more than that, and that's why I really like that passage, because it feels like, to me, it's like he's saying, okay, there's some kind of awakening that you're going to experience, and it's going to be exalted, and you can just stay with that, forever. To my way of thinking, that's not what he's saying in that sutta. That we're just noticing whatever is happening, whatever it is, and he covers all the bases. So that's why I really like that section of that sutra.
So that to me is like the squirrels thinking, oh, all these acorns, it's going to be like this every year. Yeah.
Yeah, the exalted.
It's just not happening. It's not going to be that way. The other thing that Dokai pointed out during winter practice period is that this Mahasatipatthana Sutta starts out with Buddha saying, this is the direct path. He doesn't say that very often, but he says this is the direct path. So it's kind of, he's kind of, what? Now I'm looking for a word.
He's kind of zeroing in on this one. It's
yeah.
Like, if you only have like one or two sutras, to pay attention to, this is the one. So.
And from what I understand from Dokai again, that Thich Nhat Hanh would lecture on this every other year. So and there's a few books where people transcribed some of those talks. So, but that's why that knowing that he did that, Thich Nhat Hanh did that, makes more sense to me. That when people told me that, like, they would give me that book and they say, I was there when he gave this lecture, and then it's like I would hear from somebody else, I was there when I heard this lecture. It's like, oh, well, this is how this is possible if he's doing this every 2 years.
Thank you very much, Ryushin, for your talk. And our time is just about up. So first I'll tell you that next week's speakers are Jushin and Shodo Spring. March speakers are Jushin, Shodo Spring, Kikan, Howard, and Dozen, Alex Lawrence. So those are the next 4 speakers. Events coming up is on March 10th. There's a 6-week study group of the Genjo Koan from 6:30 to 8:30. I'm not sure what 3:10 is. Is that a Tuesday or something?
Mondays.
Mondays, okay, so it's Monday from 6:30 to 8 p.m. On April 2nd, there's a retreat led by Mark Anderson at Hokyoji. And then on April 10th, there's a Caring for the Land retreat. And then on May 1st, there's a True Hearts Women's Retreat beginning. That's a Thursday, May 1st. So that's the upcoming schedule. As always, donations are appreciated should you be inclined to do so. And why don't we close now with our 4 vows? Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. So thank you all. And thank you again, Ryushin, for your talk. Bye-bye.